Did you know the average CNC machine can be more precise than the thickness of a human hair if dialed in correctly? From boxes to a functioning CNC, today we're going to show you the entire process. CNCs are rapidly becoming more popular amongst makers and woodworkers. You'll see the highs, the lows, and even those oops moments that make us all human. Whether you're wrestling with the perfect cut or feeling overwhelmed by CNC complexities, we've got you covered. We're showcasing the entire process and solving these challenges along the way. We'll dive into the mechanical build, showing you how to bring these powerful machines to life. Next, we're going to tackle the wiring, ensuring our machine is not just built, but also powered up for optimal performance. Then it's on to software setup. Watch as we navigate the digital controls that make CNC machining so versatile and precise. Calibration is key, and we'll guide you through fine-tuning your machine for utmost accuracy in every project. Ever used an XYZ Probe? We'll show you how to set it up and use it to achieve perfect reference points every time. We'll dive into the basics of CAD, CAM, CNC machine setup, unveiling the software side of the CNC. From design to execution, understand how your ideas become reality. And to keep you on track, we'll cover the common pitfalls beginners face and how to avoid them, ensuring a smooth CNC journey. So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, there's something for everyone. Let's do this.
If you want to see how we build our CNC, you're in the right place. Let's go. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to the channel. Today we have some really exciting stuff happening in the workshop. We are picking up a CNC. Bit of backstory on that. As business has grown and we've started to do more with the laser, we inquired about a CNC. So we actually reached out to a company called the Maker Store, which is a Melbourne-based company here in Victoria, which is fantastic because it's only 2 hours away. So it's great to find a company that is local that can supply us with what we were after. I inquired about purchasing a CNC and they actually emailed back saying, hey, do you want to work together? And then we came to an agreement that involved us getting a discounted CNC. But one of the things that the Maker Store actually stipulated is they did not want to pay for a positive review. They just wanted to provide us with a discounted CNC for honest feedback and some content, which was fantastic from us because it worked well for them, worked well for us because we get a CNC, we get to show you all about it. And then we also get to give an honest review at the end, as well as an honest review on the build process, which was fantastic because we're all about providing honest quality content to all of our viewers. And we didn't want to feel that we were being paid to say, hey, this is a great product if it's not, but we'll get to that in the end. Now let's go get us a CNC. And this is what a 3 by 1.5 meter CNC looks like. Flat pack. Now let's go through the assembly. Let's get stuff out of these boxes and see what we're working with. Everything is individually wrapped in bubble wrap, which is sensational, particularly for transport. So nothing is going to get damaged. I shouldn't say nothing, but it is a lot less likely to get damaged. The thing wrapped up like so. Now we're going to just stack everything back in those boxes, get rid of all of the foam. I'm not going to lie, everything's very neat, but that's for sure. The 2-year-old of me. So now let's get stuck into the build. A couple of things about the build that we're going to do here today. Firstly, this video and any of the other videos that I do regarding this CNC do not replace the instruction manual. The manual is sensational. It has so much good information and it runs you through step by step. I'm going to be referring to the manual the whole way through this process because I've never built one of these. So the manual is there to guide you through. I highly suggest you use it. Otherwise, there is no way you're going to build this CNC. I'll give you a quick run through of how the manual works, but the manual is online. It's on their website. I'll link that in the description below, as well as we'll just jump on there quickly and show you how the manual actually works. Okay, so I've just jumped onto the Maker Store website just to give you an idea of what the installation guides look like. So I think one of the key things to note here is the updated April 5th, 2023. So that is 5 days ago. So they do keep this up to date and current with changes. They update as they go, but it basically walks you through the whole process step by step. So if you scroll down, you can see the index here where it walks you through each component. So if you're doing a 1000mm to 1500mm model, you'd go to your gear rack where mine is a 3000mm. So that brings us here. And then it walks you through step by step exactly what you need to do. So I will follow through this whole process and refer to this manual. Highly recommend you do the same as you go through and build your CNC. There are a lot of components to this CNC, so I've gone ahead and pulled out just the components needed for the Y-axis. Everything else is still in the boxes behind me. We're just gonna focus on the Y-axis. There's a bag per axis. You can tell which is which because the outside bag has a label on it, just here. It says WBYG. Y meaning Y-axis. So as long as you've got that, you're good to go. You don't want to start muddling up parts because you're just going to get confused and it's going to get messy really quickly. Let's bust out this back. The beautiful thing about this is every single bag is labeled, which corresponds to your instruction manual, which makes life so much easier. So step one, we're going to take our wheels and tip them all over the place. I mean, strategically place them right next to the bag so you don't get confused. So we need our wheels, our bearings. So here you go. This is why it's going to get really confusing really quickly if you don't stay organized. As you can see, so these are both bearings. Look very similar. If you dump everything out, mix up packs and whatnot, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get your two bearings, different diameter holes. So take your time, keep everything organized, and it's going to make your life a lot easier in the long run. So we're going to take our wheels, our bearings, and our shims. So to assemble your wheel, you want to take one of your wheels, one of your bearings, push it in position. Now I've used a 5mm bearing, so I want to drop a 5mm shim in the middle and then push another 5mm bearing over the top. And that should give me a wheel with a bearing on the inside. Now we're going to repeat that with all of our wheels, keeping our 5 and our 8mm wheels separate. And the other thing is you want to make sure you're only using one shim in each wheel. I'm not going to recommend hitting these with a hammer, but if you want to save your hands, take a block of timber and just use the block to just push these in position because the block's not going to damage anything. If you start smacking it with a hammer, you're probably going to cause yourself some damage. Now I've swapped bearings, so my bearing sizes. So now I'm going to take my other shim size. So I want to swap those to make sure I'm using the right size shim for the right size bearing. Again, one shim per wheel. So there, you get all your wheels, two different size bearings. Keep them separate. Clean up your mess as you go. Otherwise, it's just gonna get messy. Messy and confusing. Okay, motor assembly plate. Plate for your stepper motor. What I like to do is at each stage, refer to the manual because it gives you a breakdown of everything you will need for that section. Then you can go and get all of those components, put everything else aside, go ahead and assemble with just what you've got there, and it's just gonna keep things cleaner and tidier. Other cool thing about the manual versus your pack, I'm going to look for those cap screws, and then on the manual it'll actually have the code that's on the label, so I can refer to here and go, okay, so I need a 30mm, so screw M5 cap 31. So that's a 16 one, so that's the wrong one of those ones. Exact same screw, different length, quick and easy using the label on the front and the manual. And then you got 30mm low profile screws. So as you can see, for this step, none of that is required. That's not required. That's not required. These aren't required. Those aren't required. They're still required for this overall, but this is all we actually need for this particular part of the process. So if you work through it systematically, it's gonna be so much easier in the long run. And now you just work through step by step, going through the process. So all I'm doing is taking the image from the manufacturer's guide and replicating that with the components that I've got. So I'm gonna take plate, take my screw, feed it through the second hole up. Then on top of that is gonna go my bearing. Now to assemble your bearing, I don't know if you can see this on camera, you have a little groove that the bearing actually sits inside of on the washer, which the wheels roll on. So we'll drop that over. Now just loosely tighten this on until you can get everything else assembled. Just make sure you're doing up the bags as you go. Otherwise, you're gonna get spillage, and I'm not gonna say I'm speaking from experience here, but if you've ever put together a 3D printer, you understand. So effectively, that's what you're left with. So that's where you should be at now. Now we're gonna go ahead and install the spring, which will sit in between the two L brackets there. And again, now we'll pick out what we need for that next component. I've gone ahead and replicated it, so I now have 2 of those. I like to do it as I do the previous one because it's fresh in my mind rather than go through the whole process, then come back to the start and go again. I just find that works easier. Let's get stuck into the spring. We're just following the same instructions and it's simply match the picture to what you're doing. Simple as that. Again, I'm gonna go through and get all the components relevant to this step. So I get my 60 mils, my precision shims, and eventually you start to get the hang of the codes and everything because they're very similar. Just following those same steps as the instruction says and just assembling it all. I could be speaking too soon here, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm pretty much skipping the words and just viewing the pictures because they're so good. They are so straightforward. It's actually working out quite easily. At this stage, everything is just finger tight and we'll tighten it all off at the end. So hello everybody. How are you? Good. No, you gotta ask them how they are. They know you're good because you're smiling, but how are they?
How are you?
They're good, they told me. Welcome interruption, that's for sure. And I'll get back to the lovely viewers that are wanting to see me put together a CNC. Ah, the joys of children. Okay, where were we? We're gonna go ahead and tighten all of these up now. Not super tight, just finger tight, well, lightly mechanical tight, if you wanna say. You need a 3mm Allen key, 4mm Allen key, and 8mm spanner. I like to get the Allen keys that have this sort of ring on the end, which just makes it super easy to tighten them. And I put the shim on the wrong side, which is causing all kinds of havoc. In that moment I said, don't worry about the words. That was bad advice. Use the pictures and the words. Kira here from the future, the brackets aren't identical, so make sure you orientate them the right way. I'll show you here. See how one hole is closer? You want to make sure the closer hole is what's fixing to the bracket. So closer hole fixing to the bracket, which will allow the spring to sit far off enough, it doesn't interfere with the bolts. That was frustrating. What are the chances that I got that the wrong way around on all 4 bolts? Actually, I don't want to know. There's still some bright sparks that comment 1 in 4. Now we'll take our spring, thread that through with no interference from the bolts. Now we'll repeat that to the other one. Now that we've got both of those done, we will get stuck into the stepper motor. So first things first, you want to take your motor. For those who don't know, the stepper motor is effectively the motor that controls the CNC. We're going to take that out and then we're going to put the pinion on. So my particular unit is a rack and pinion setup rather than a lead screw setup, just with the longer length because I've got a 3-meter unit. They recommended using the gear and pinion unit, the rack and pinion, which is effectively a pinion or a gear that runs along a racking system which moves the CNC rather than a screw that tightens and loosens. So first thing you want to do is put your gear onto your stepper motor. On the stepper motor there is a flat bladed section of the round shaft, which is where the screw lines up with. So sit that in position, then take your grub screw. Ooh, my number one fear, losing your screw. Probably going to be easier to start the grub screw off, slide that in position, and then tighten that down. This appears to be a 2.5mm hex bit rather than the standard 3mm the rest has been. And just make sure you don't throw out your connectors. Keep them for later. We're going to take the stepper motor and fix that in position using the threaded screws and threaded holes in the plate. Just make sure the cable's coming out the base of your stepper motor when you install it. Gonna make it a lot neater in the end. Now that we've got the stepper motor installed, let's add some wheels so it can roll along our extrusion. So the instructions specifically say start with the bottom right. So we're gonna do exactly that. And again, I'm just marrying up the instructions here. The weird looking spacer, because I can't say that word, the rounded section needs to go and actually get inserted into the plate. Then onto that goes your wheel. If your bearing, see how the the spacer in the middle is closing off the hole, just take a small Allen key and just position that so it's center. Now we are just gonna go ahead and lightly tighten that. We'll tighten it a lot further when we adjust it all later on. The wheel should be able to move freely. Then we're gonna go ahead and do the top right. For the M8 nuts, you're gonna need a 13mm spanner. Again, I'm checking the wheels move freely. So as you can see, that is spinning nicely, but the bolt is nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten either because then you risk damaging your bearings. Snug is key. Now we'll go ahead and attach all of the wheels. Just systematically working through, checking that the wheels spin freely as you go. You don't want to get the whole CNC assembled and realize one wheel's not spinning properly and then have to find that wheel. So on these spaces, there's a little 6mm lettering, and as you can see, the hole is offset. So what you want to do is make sure that 6mm, the lettering is facing down. So take your shifter and just rotate these until that lettering is facing down, which is going to open up the space between the two sets of wheels. So now I've got those letters face down on all of those, giving me maximum distance here. Now we want to go ahead and adjust the assembly to snugly fit the extrusion. So you could get your Y extrusion, which is in my case 3 meters long. Give me a pain in the neck to work with. So I'm going to grab my X extrusion, which is like 200mm long, easy to work with. It's going to give me the exact same results because it's the exact same sort of extrusion. So you want to take your extrusion and then feed that the wheels over. You want to sit it so it's upside down, so you've got access to those spaces with the offset hole. So now what we're going to do is just take our shifter and just tweak these ever so slightly, starting with the outside until we get a nice snug fit, so no wobble, but the channel is still able to move through there freely. In my case, about a quarter of a turn. That may vary. We've got that one spot on. Let's repeat the process. Okay, the final step in the Y-axis assembly is to actually attach what we've just assembled to the extrusion channel. Easiest way I found to do that is to prop it up slightly so that the wheels can actually clear underneath, because it's going to sit something like that and it's going to hang down a little bit lower than the extrusion. If you work it flat on a table, it's just not going to work. And the other thing where I actually deviate from the instruction manual is I will install one of my end caps first, because I found that I kept knocking that T-nut out that you have to install at the end. It's really frustrating me. So let's grab some gear and head on down to the end. Okay, so what the instruction manual says to feed this T-bolt in from one end and then all of your racking in after it. What I found was easier is to just slot that in position, put your end cap on. Now head down to the other end and feed your racking in from that end. Depending on the size unit you've got, you may need to cut these down. They recommend about 2mm protruding out for your end cap. But before we sit our end cap on, we will get our stepper motor installed. The stepper motor is simple to install, but the key is don't force it. First things first is make sure your gear is protruding out far enough that it's going to catch onto that rack that we just installed. All you do is just loosen off that grub screw, pull it out a whisker, roughly so it lines up with the wheels. We can adjust it later. So we've just roughly lined that up with the wheels. We'll feed this on nice and gently. If you've got too much resistance, you can go back to those bottom nut and loosen them off to give you more space. So we've got that sitting in nicely. We'll throw some T-nuts in. I've no idea what these are for. I'm just following the instructions. So we'll just feed these bad boys in, making sure the flat side is face down. So we've got 2 each side on the bottom and then 3 in this first slot here. The other thing you do want to do, which I probably should have told you to do before putting this cap on, is make sure that gear is running. I'm actually gonna have to pull this cap back off. So you wanna make sure that gear there runs center to the racking. Mine's currently off center, so I'm gonna adjust that before I feed that back on. Now we'll go ahead and repeat that exact same process on the other extrusion, and that's a wrap on the Y axis. Now let's get stuck into the X. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get stuck into the X axis. I've done the exact same thing. I've laid out all of my components solely for the X axis. Everything else is still in the boxes behind me. We're just gonna focus on the X. Again, we're following through the instruction manual, starting at the start, just working our way through for your particular unit. Mine might be slightly different to yours, so make sure you're using the instruction for your unit. So step one, let's start with prepping the wheels. Given that we just went through that X axis, we're not gonna go through that again now, given it's the exact same thing. Now we get on to mounting everything to the plate. So I've gone ahead and got all of my components that are solely related to the step that I'm gonna be working on. Now I go ahead and I can assemble everything quite easily. Beautiful, and that there is what you should be left with. Now we get on to the spring system. Again, we're gonna skip this. So we've got a little bit of pressure there, what we're looking for. Now we'll divert our attention to our stepper motor. Again, we've just done this, so we're gonna skip over it here. Now we're gonna go ahead and assemble the whole mechanism. So we'll install the wheels in between the two plates. Now with your spacers, just make sure the rounded side goes onto the plate, so it actually seats inside the plate. And on there, there's a little word that says 6 millimeters. You wanna make sure that's facing down. That's gonna give you the most space between your wheels for getting this installed. Just makes life a lot easier. You can adjust that later, so don't stress too much. And then you want to tighten everything up. So the most important thing is to make sure the spaces that actually seat inside the plate are in fact seated inside the plate. So as you can see there, mine currently aren't. So we just want to wiggle that around until they're all seated inside the plate, which they are now. We'll tighten those up. Don't forget to set your wheel tension using the 300 millimeter of extrusion from the Z axis in the exact same manner we did the Y earlier on. Okay, this step is easier if you actually prop your extrusion up, because then the wheels don't get in the way when you actually feed the stepper motor on. Go ahead and install our sliding T-nut, and then we will feed through our racking. Just make sure you don't lose your T-nut at the other end. You may need to cut this down depending on the size unit you've got. They say the ideal length is 2 millimeters hanging out the end. I've got about 5, so I'll snip that off. Then we're gonna go ahead and install all of our T-nuts, making sure the flat side is facing out. These will all be used later. Then we can go ahead and load the stepper motor onto the C channel. Beautiful. Before you get too far, you want to make sure the gear is running center to the racking. As you can see, mine is currently offset. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that now before I get too far ahead of myself. And to do that, we're just going to loosen off that grub screw, slide the gear out, tighten the grub screw back up. Get that tightened. And now we will just feed that back on. Okay, now that we've got all of that assembled, we can get that attached to our Y-axis. A little bit of help makes this a lot easier, because being able to support both ends is a bit challenging, so I'm going to get some help over here. Okay, maybe grown up help's more appropriate, but it's working. Thanks, Squirtle. Now we're going to go ahead and add some additional corner supports just for additional strength. The 8 millimeter screws go into your T-nuts in the extrusion. 10 millimeters go into the plate. I find it easiest to screw everything into the extrusion first, then go ahead and do it into the plate. It saves me mixing and matching screws. And that's it for the X-axis. Next up, we'll do the Z-axis. Today, we're getting stuck into building out the X-axis and getting that installed on the unit itself. So let's get stuck in. So to start with, we're going to get our components for this stage of the build, and we're going to go ahead and mount the T-nut to the lineal rail. So we're just going to go ahead and get these started. And we're going to go ahead and repeat that a second time. So we've got 2 of these. So now we should end up with 2 that look very similar to that. Now we're going to go ahead and attach the linear rails to the extrusion. To do that, we're just going to line up the T-bolt, feeding it through one at a time. T-nut, I should say. You may need to loosen them off if you tighten them too far. There is no easy way to do this on camera, so I'm going to have to go back to laying it down flat. It helps you put the T-nuts on in facing the correct direction, makes life a bit easier. Now let's see if this slides in a little bit easier. Still not easy to do on camera. Now we'll sit it firm down on something, and then we can tighten those up. And now repeat with the other side. From there, we can slide on the 4 bearings. So the bearings actually come with a plastic retainer on, so that the ball bearing inside doesn't fall out. So the best way to install these is to actually line up the retainer and then slide it over, rather than taking that out. If you lose one of those bearings, you're in trouble. So now we're just going to set that aside while we work on the lead screw. We're going to grab all of our components that we require. And again, we are just taking our time to make sure all the components marry up with the picture in the instruction manual, taking our time to make sure we get it all correct. So this is what you should be left with, something similar. Now we're going to go ahead and attach that lead screw to the gantry over here that we assembled earlier, which is simply a whole heap of screws. And you should be left with something that looks something like this. Now just be careful moving it around that you don't allow those bearings to slide off, because you're in strife if you do that. Now we're going to go ahead and install the end plates. Basically just take the plate and screw those off with the corresponding screws. We're then going to install the 2 lock collars on the lead screw. Put the grub screws in while you've got easy access to those lock collars. Feed that over the lead screw. Then the bearing goes over. Slide it down. Do the same at the top. Lock collar, bearing. Now position it so the bearing seats inside the end cap. Then tighten up your lock collar and then do the same at the top edge. But you want to position it so the bottom, the lead screw is flush with the bottom plate and it's protruding out the top of the top cap. So now the lead screw can spin freely, but it's not actually sliding up and down. And you can see down there how that bearing is actually seated inside the end cap. Now we're going to go ahead and attach the stepper motor to the lead screw. So you're going to take your stepper motor, you're going to slide your jaw coupling on, so the smaller hole fits over the stepper motor, and then your larger hole fits over your lead screw. At this stage, don't tighten anything down. Why? Because the instructions say so. I don't actually know why yet. We'll work it out together. Then we're going to put our spacer blocks in between and fix that into position. And you just want your cabling to come back out of your stepper motor on the same side as the plate. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. Now that we're in position, I'm going to go ahead and tighten the jaw coupling up. Well, now we're in position. We're going to take 4 12mm cap screws over to the X axis and we will get these matched on and move on to the spoil board. And that is the Z axis complete. Now it's time to whack the spoil board onto the base frame. Okay, let's crack on with the final stage of the mechanical assembly of the Workbee CNC with the spoil board. Now, I'm not talking about the timber spoil board. I'm talking about the substructure that will eventually hold your spoil board, which needs to go on to keep everything square. So we're going to dive straight in, and it is as simple as attaching a front and back rail using some little brackets here and the T-nut. We already installed the T-nuts in the extrusions at the start. Now we're just going to go ahead and install them in the front and back rails and mount it all on. One thing to note with the brackets, the holes are not spaced in the same spots. So you want to make sure the ones that are closer to the outside are mounting to your C-channel or your C-beam up the sides, and the ones that are closer to the internal mount into the actual rails. So I found it easiest to fit the T-nuts loosely to the brackets on the center holes. So loosely fit that on. Then we'll jump underneath and we'll mount that bracket to the T-nuts that we've already slid into the C-beam. Repeat on the other side, and then you can actually feed the C-channel over the T-nuts, which just makes it so much easier to fit as a one-man band. Now you want to flush the front of the extrusion up with the front cap. Tighten those off, just tightening the top ones for the moment, because that will still allow us to move it back and forth. We'll do the same on the other side. Now I found it easiest to get my spacing by pulling the gantry all the way down to the end, because I know this measurement can't change. If I've got this positioned in the right spot down the end here, and then I position my rail to the center as possible, then I know that's in the right spot. I can tighten this off. I do just make sure that I'm putting pressure up on the underside to close up any gap here, because I want the support to be nice and sturdy. The other thing I do like to do now, being a woodworker and a carpenter, I like to keep everything as square as possible throughout the whole build rather than fix it at the end. We are going to go through a squaring process at the end when we go to commission the unit, but if we keep it square now, it's going to make our life a lot easier. Now that we've got the front and back rails on, we can actually take these blocks out that are lifting the unit up, because the wheels will no longer catch. Now we're going to go ahead and install our internal rail supports. So we're going to go ahead and mount an L bracket in the channel there, making sure the hole that's closest to the edge is being mounted in our channel. And we want to mount that 10 millimeters in from this outside edge. The easiest way to do that would be to use a packer, something that you know is 10 mil. So I'm just going to use a combination square, but you could use a window packer, you could use a carpenter's ruler, whatever works. So we'll just set that in position, tighten that off. And then on the side here, you've already put your T-nuts in earlier. We're just going to loosely tighten that in. And once we've got all 3 rails in place, we're going to evenly space them before securing them firmly. And then from there, we just want to make sure that the gantry does not catch on it. Bottom. So as long as you're 10 mil in, you're fine. Once we've got all of those supports mounted, we'll go ahead and take our end caps and mount them to the 4 corners just to neaten everything up. And that, my friends, is a wrap on the mechanical build of this project. So we have gone ahead and assembled the entire CNC. Now we're on to the wiring and commissioning of the unit. If you like this video, I've got anything out, smash that like button. If you want to see the rest of the build, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to the channel. If you've been following along, we have recently picked up a CNC from the Maker Store here in Melbourne and we are going through the assembly process. Today, we are going to go ahead and get our cable chain supports installed. Hold up. We are actually going to go through the entire cable management system, including how we run our wire and how we connect them all up to the unit. Stick around to the end because I'm sure you'll get something out of this video. We're going to go ahead and start with the heavy cable chain support, which is our Y-axis. We're going to use the heavy because of the length. Now mine comes in 3 parts, so we're going to take a small screwdriver, slot this in the little gap there, and then work the last link out. Then we'll do the same up the other end, and then we can join those back together, giving us a longer length. Do the same up the other end. What you're wanting to do is making sure you're taking out one with the open end and one with the corresponding so that the 2 ends can snap together. So yeah, so you've effectively got one end that's male, one end that's female, so they will link together nicely. Beautiful. Now that gives us one full length cable chain support. Now, like always, we take out our little pack that goes with the cable chain support. Now we're going to take the correct T-nuts. So we are going to take the T-nuts, drop them in. These are nice because these are a drop-in T-nut. And we are going to go ahead and mount the corner support. We're roughly going to line it up with the corner, but I like to leave these a little bit loose. And then when we get this in position, we can then tighten it off then. Now we can then bring this bad boy over, line that up. So this is where I will push all of these into position, take it off. So now we've got these flushed up at the back there. We'll just go ahead and tighten that off. Then we can go ahead and attach this to the plate above the stepper motor. Once you've got that in position, go ahead and drop in 2 T-nuts. And then on the outside, just to clean up that outside look, they give you some nice little cover plates. And then you can sit the chain in position, bring that up around the top and bolt that into those T-bolts. Now we need to go ahead and mount the other end of the Y drag chain assembly. To do that, we mount it directly to the bench. So whatever is actually supporting your CNC, you want to mount it to that, whether it be an aluminium structure or a wooden table. Now the X is quite simple. You get this extra little bracket that is going to mount to your chain support like so. And then this is going to bolt onto your plate, holding that in position. Once you've got the bracket installed, you can then go ahead and fix your chain in place. As you can see, I have too much chain. So what I'm going to do is come back. I reckon I'm going to go about 100 mil back from my plates, which is going to give me some play, and I'm actually going to get rid of the excess. So we'll take that out. We'll pop off our end. Just make sure when you put your end in, you orientate it so your screw holes are face down to the extrusion. Now we're going to test it. Perfect. We'll go back. Beautiful. Take our 2 M4 drop-in T-nuts. Drop those T-nuts in place. Push them back to where they need to go. Tighten those off. Now we'll test that that chain works. Sure does. Now that we've got the drag chains installed, we're going to go ahead and mount our spindle before moving on to all of our wiring and electronics. To do that, you get these nifty little brackets which effectively clamp onto your spindle, holding the spindle in place. And you get some support brackets to hold it onto your Z-axis. So all I've done is gone ahead and screwed that all together to give you a good look at it. And then we can slot this in place, tightening all the screws, and then install the spindle. Now this next part is probably the most critical part about mounting your spindle. On your brackets, you've got some labeling. Make sure it's the right way up or it's just gonna look terrible and bug the hell out of you once it's installed. So right way up. We're just going to rotate these T-bolts until they all line up snug in the right direction, and then that will seat in place, tighten them up. So I've made the bottom bracket flush with the bottom of the extrusion. Then what I'm going to do is install my spindle. So I've just lowered that down. Now I can sit the spindle in place and then lift that up to the right height. snug up your bolts. Now that will allow you to get the height for your second bracket. Rotate those T-nuts until they're the right direction, and you can slide that on to the right height. I'm just going flush with top of aluminium. Tighten up the two top bolts, then you can take the spindle out completely. Do not let that roll off, that will be a very expensive accident. Tighten up all of your bolts nice and snug now that you've got your spindle in the right position, and then you can remount your spindle. Make sure that's nice and snug. Kieran here from the future. Rookie mistake. We're going to make this so that the top bracket is flush with the top of the Z-axis extrusion, which will give me maximum cutting down below. That, my friends, is how you mount the spindle for this particular unit. Now we are going to go ahead and mount our limiting switches before we start running some cables. Okay, so the next point of call is installing your limit switches. This will be the last bit of physical hardware that goes on, and then everything else is wiring from there on. What the limit switch is a little device, or switch I should say, that effectively forms a bumper which will cut the machine out when it hits it. I like to use my front left as my 0-0 port, so I'm going to install all of my limit switches in this corner. The other benefit there is I don't have cables running everywhere else. So there's two different types of limit switches that the maker store stock. I'm using version A. So first things first, you're going to take a 3.5mm drill bit and drill out your holes, which will increase them to allow the M3 bolt to go through. Then you can bolt the limit switch to the plate, loosely thread on your T-nut, and then you can get to installing them. Once we've got all three limit switches installed in their various locations, one on the Y-axis, one on the X-axis, and one on the Z-axis. Once we've got all of those installed, we'll get to wiring them after we've run all of our cables for the whole machine. Now that we've got those installed, we can start running some cables. Okay, so let's talk through the wiring of this machine. We've got three components that actually require wiring. The first is the controller. I'm using an X Pro version 5, but basically what the controller does is runs all your stepper motors, your limiting switches, and your RFD, which runs your spindle. It can run your emergency stop, however, that will only pause the machine. And my thought process is, if it's an emergency, I want to kill the power. If it's a, hey, I need to stop the machine and pause it, I'm going to use the software. So I won't run my emergency stop through my controller. I will run that through my power supply and get an electrician to wire that up so that it cuts the power to the machine because it's an emergency. That's my thought pattern. You're welcome to do whichever you please. The second is the power supply. So the power supply powers the controller, which in turn powers the RFD. We will not cover fitting off the power supply because that has to be done by a licensed electrician. I'm going to leave that to the electricians. And then the final piece of the puzzle is the RFD, which stands for variable frequency device, I think, which basically is a fancy way of saying runs your spindle. So this one runs your spindle, your controller runs this, which runs your spindle. When I did a bit of training with the maker store, they did recommend that we keep the RFD and the controller a minimum of 500mm apart to reduce electromagnetic interference. So that's why I've got it set up the way I have. And I've also got it set up at the back because this is where the least dust is going to be, because 90% of the cutting will be done at the front. I want to keep the dust away rather than having this up at the front. And then I've got clean access to this if I ever need them. And then in turn, the computer will be set up here, so all of that can be wired in. That's just my setup. They will come with mounting brackets to mount to a wall, to mount to your bench, whatever works for you. I've just gone ahead and mounted them all to French cleats because if you follow my videos, I've got French cleats everywhere. Now let's get stuck into running the cables. Basically, we are going to go ahead and drag all of our cables through our drag chains and run them to the appropriate place. You can feed them all through individually and run them through like so and just weave the whole way down, which is going to take forever. The other option is you can take a screwdriver and actually pop every couple of these bad boys off. I actually find with the bigger one, using your fingers is just as easy as using a screwdriver. So those actually pop out, giving you more space. And the same can happen with the smaller drag chain, depending on what you've got. Kieran here from the future. I tried something that did not work. I actually tried to feed through yellow tongue. That was a bad call. It just kept getting jammed and there was too much trying to get through the drag chain. I would highly recommend just popping your chain apart from the start. So what you want to consider is what do you need to get where? I like to go to my furthest point first and then work back. So what do I need to get through this large drag chain? Basically everything here. So I need to get the spindle. So spindle, stepper motor 1, stepper motor 2, stepper motor 3, and 3 limiting switches. What do I need to get directly at the spindle? 2 stepper motors, 1 limiting switch, 1 spindle. So I'm gonna go and get my spindle cable, which is this big, thick, chunky one. Again, back from the future, to reduce electrostatic interference or noise, which causes your spindle to skip and move incorrectly, a good tip is to take your spindle wire out of the drag chain. I ended up running mine with the dust extraction hose rather than with all my cables, but I learned that the hard way after having to fix the electrostatic interference. The alternative is to cable tie it to the outside of your drag chain if you have no other option, but keep it as far away from all of your signal wires as possible. I'm gonna go get my stepper motor cable, which is the thicker 4 cable. I don't actually know what the technical name is. The one that's got 4 things in it, and the limiting switch cable is the thinner cable. So I'll show you all 3 side by side. 1, 2, and 3, spindle, stepper motor, limiting switch. 3 very distinct sizes. So I need to get spindle, 1 limiting switch, 2 stepper motors. Easiest way to get the 2 stepper motors, grab both ends. This is where you can really experience how stupid of an idea the yellow tongue was, because it is not working. Just pop out the links of the cable chain and do it with some smarts from the beginning, and you'll have a much smoother run. I'm not going to show you me pulling through all of the cables, but what you're going to want to do is pull all the cables you need through, keeping them as neat as possible. Try to minimize crossing any of the cables. Should be a little bit easier for you as you're not battling the spindle cable. One thing you want to consider is you want at least 100 mil of overhang at a minimum, which will make sense when we go to fit everything off. But yeah, minimum 100 mil, if not 150, 200 mil. Now this is not a necessity. I'm lying. It is a necessity. You must do this next step, but it will make your life so much easier later down the track. Go along and label all of your cables corresponding at the other end, because what that will allow you to do is quickly reference which plug it's got to go into when you're actually fitting it all off later on. So all I do, I take some painter's tape and label it Z. So this will be for my Z stepper motor. I'm just going to pick 1 cable. So I've labeled that one with Z. I'm going to tug on this. So now I know that this is my Z. So I'll label that one as well, which means I know my other one's going to be my X. So I can label that one. I think you get the point. Label your cables as you go. I'll skip over this now. And then we're going to jump down the other end, pull on each one of these to work out which one's the corresponding one down that end, cut it off at a rough length of where we know it's got to go before we run the next lot of cables. In the interest of keeping you intrigued and interested in this video, I am not going to show you how to run the next set of cables. It is exactly the same. Let's get to terminating these cables. Now that is all of our cables run, we can go ahead and start to fit all of the cables off. I've gone ahead and grabbed myself a bit of offcut to show you what we're going to do, but fitting these cables off is the exact same for all the stepper motors, all of the limiting switches. There is just a different number of cables involved. So stripping the cable back, what I like to do is actually get the cable, take 100 mil of the outer sheathing off. A pair of wire strippers will make this so much easier than using pliers, but take roughly 100 mil off, peel that off, and you're left with a cable that has this outer metal sheathing on it. So just untwist that from the cables, and then you can pinch that together, and I like to just give it a little twist, take some cutters and just cut that off. You don't need that. For your stepper motors, you are left with 4 cables and a drain wire. So you got your blue, red, green and yellow, and then a metal drain wire that has no protection. That metal drain wire is really important if you need it. It's not really important at the moment, but if it came to needing it, you want that there. That's why I cut off 100 mil. Then I'm just going to fold that drain wire down out of the way, because we're not actually going to use that. Then I'm going to take my other 4 colors. I'm going to cut them back so they're about 30 mil. Then I take my wire strippers and strip off approximately 15 mil. That's what we are left with. Drain wire down here, all 4 colors, nicely stripped at the top. I'm going to twist them lightly just so they're nice and firm. And then we're going to grab the coupling. The coupling is effectively a connector, or a connector, I should call it, not a coupling. So the connector is going to join your stepper motor to the stepper motor cables that we just ran at the stepper motor. So to connect them, you unscrew your screws, which will open up the spacings And then you can go ahead and insert your cables straight like that. Or you can use what is called a bootlace ferrule, which is this little connector here, which sleeves over the top of your cable. And it's simply designed to give a much nicer finish. Definitely not required. It is definitely advisable if you're unplugging, plugging back in, that sort of thing. But if you're just gonna connect this and then leave it, these aren't necessarily a must-have. They are simply there to tidy everything up, but I'm gonna use them because I have a little bit of OCD tendencies and like everything to be neat. So how I'm gonna go installing all of my connectors is I'm going to strip it back so it ends up looking like so. Then I'm gonna take some heat shrink, thread that over all of my cables, and then we're gonna thread that over our drain wire, which is gonna keep that nice and concealed and keep that in place. Then we're gonna attach our ferrules. So we are just going to feed that straight over the top. Take our square crimper, crimp that in place, trim off the excess cabling, the excess wire I should say, and repeat. Thread it in, crimp, trim, and repeat. Thread it in, crimp, trim, and repeat. Thread it in, crimp, trim. Now the order of connection for your cables is red, green, blue, yellow. I'm gonna use half with my ferrule, half with not for the demonstration, but all you're gonna do is take those 4 points, put them in each of the 4 connections, tighten up your screws so they're nice and snug. Then we're gonna do a tug test, make sure we can't pull those out. And that is the difference between having a ferrule and not having a ferrule. So one just neatly conceals the ends, but again, personal preference. And then I would slide that heat shrink up just so it's over the top, heat that up and seal that all in place. We're gonna go ahead and get all of our stepper motors connected down at the stepper motor end. Then we will go through what we do at our control end because it is slightly different depending on if you have a rack and pinion setup like mine or a lead screw. So we'll go through that once we get to it. Let's get connecting.
Again, I could bore you with this whole process, or I could just give you a quick montage of me doing it in super speed. Let's go!
Okay, now that we've got all of our stepper motors connected to the cables at the machine end, we need to connect all of those into our controller. I've gone ahead and stripped all of the cables the exact same way as we did it down the other end. And now we're gonna go ahead and fit it into the connector. So all of the connectors will go in the following manner except the Y2. Because I'm using a rack and pinion setup, it needs to go the opposite direction. So this is for all of them. Will be red, green, blue, yellow. And this is where labeling all of your cables makes life so much easier because you know which point. So this was my X cable. So on my controller is going to get plugged in to my X point. If you haven't labeled everything, it makes this part very challenging. Not impossible, just challenging.
You've seen me fit the cables off already. Let's zoom through this again.
Then we'll plug that into the correct point. We'll then go ahead and do the Y and X axis following the exact same manner.
I love YouTube magic. I get to pretend like I'm the Flash.
So Y2, you need to reverse the colors at one end. I like to reverse it at the controller end because then it's easy for maintenance if I've got to do anything, swap anything, because that's where everything terminates. So everything is identical down at the machine end, but at the controller end, we swap this around. So it'll be yellow, blue, green, red on this point. Whoops. Don't forget the heat shrink. So that's all of our stepper motors wired into our controller. Now let's move on to wiring those limit switches we put on before. We're going to start with wiring in at the controller end, then we'll fit them off down at the machine end. I've gone ahead and stripped the cables in the exact same manner that we stripped the previous cables. However, you'll see that there's only 2 wires coming out of the limit switch cables, a blue and a white. So with your limit switches, you have a 3-prong connector, but you only need to use the outside point. So what we're going to do is put the white cable on the left and the blue cable on the right. Tighten all of these down, heat shrink it, and then plug it into the corresponding limit switch. And that is the controller all wired up. Now we're going to jump down at the limit switch end where we installed the actual switches and wire those off. Again, we're going to cut it approximately 100 mil longer, strip it back like we've stripped every other cable. But at this point, instead of putting a
bootlace ferrule on, we're actually going to put a spade connector, which will in turn plug into the limit switch. Thread over your heat shrink before you put your connectors on. Just a lot easier. So we'll pop one of these on each, crimp them in place, and then we can plug these in to our limit switches with the blue cable on the top and the white cable on the lower point. Then you can slide it in position, tighten off the Allen screw, and then that is your limit switch connected. And the final thing to wiring is your Pro, which is as simple as fitting off your connector. So again, exact same method as we fitted off every connector, and plugging that in to your controller. So like everything, you just loosen off your connector, red on the left, black on the right, tighten that off, and then we can plug that into the side here. Sorry about my head. And that is how you wire up your CNC to your controller. We're gonna let the electricians come in and wire up all of our mains power to the unit, and then we are gonna get stuck into going through all of the programming, setting it up for initial use. If you wanna see that, I'll link that video on the screen now, as well as the playlist for the entire build series for this CNC. If you've liked this video or got anything out of it, smash that thumbs up. It is greatly appreciated, helps us spread to more people. Feel free to subscribe to the channel to see more content like this and eventually see how we use the CNC. Cheers guys, we'll catch you on the next one.
G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking. Welcome back to the channel. We have finished assembling our CNC from the Maker Store. We've got our dust collection hooked up. We are ready to make our first cuts. But before we can do that, we need to program our VFD, which is our variable frequency device, which powers our spindle, as well as get our software set up on our computer to actually run the machine. So we're going to show you how to do that today. Let's jump on the computer. Okay, so first things first, we want to go to the Maker Store website and then find the manual specific to your VFD. So if you go up here on the manuals section, scroll down under the electronics section on the left-hand side and find your spindle and VFD. So mine is a 1.5 kilowatt spindle and VFD. So then from there, we are going to scroll down. We're going to skip the VFD connections because that needs to be done by a licensed electrician. Today, we're simply going to focus on programming the VFD. So scroll down to find your specific machine. They're all slightly different, but they will have a manual on your specific machine. So I'm going to go down to the Frolen 1.5 kilowatt VFD, which is the unit that I've got up here. From there, it's going to run you through how to actually program it, because you will actually do damage to your spindle if you use it without programming it first. So to program your VFD, you've got this control panel up the top here, and then on the Maker Store website in the instruction manual, it'll actually walk you through exactly what you need to do. So to begin, you're going to hit program. It's going to bring up F00. Then you're going to hit function to bring up the remaining digits. Jog down to 0.28, hit function. We're going to go 1, hit function, and that is going to reset this to factory settings. And then we can go through the list of parameters and make sure that we have set it correctly simply by going through each one. So the first one is F11, so F00.11. So function, that needs to be set to 1, which it is. Cool. Now we're going to go to F00.000. We're going to go function, that needs to be set to 2, which it is. Okay, so 0.1 needs to be set to 0, which it is.
I'm not going to bore you by going through this step by step. You get the general gist. Basically, you need to make sure each individual number in your VFD matches what is in the instruction manual to program your machine. Then you can move on to the next step.
And it is as simple as that to program your VFD, but I cannot stress it enough. If you skip programming it first and you jump the gun and you turn your spindle off, you do risk damaging that spindle. But if you take the time to go through the steps as set out in the instruction manual, I know it's hard sometimes, but take that time and it pays off. Now let's jump into the software side of things and program our X Pro, which is the controller for the CNC. So again, from where we were, we're going to go back to the home page of their website, go down under electronics. We are going to the X Pro V5 control system, because again, that's what we are using. If you're using a different controller, jump over to that one. This is what we've set up previously, so we're going to skip over all of the wiring. If you want to see that video, we'll leave our playlist linked in the description below. We're just going to scroll all the way down to configuring your X Pro V5 with CNC.js. Now you want to make sure you're installing the right version for your PC, but go ahead, download that and get that installed on your computer. So once you have CNC.js installed, this is the screen you were greeted with. Just minimize that and go ahead and install the driver, which is the next box down. So we are going to unzip that. Okay, so just a quick explanation of this setup. Over here, you have your connection, which is where you actually connect to your machine, your console, which actually shows you any statuses or errors, and then the widget that we will be using is the GRBL, because that is the one that our system runs on. So we're going to go ahead and hit these 3 dots and remove the remaining widgets because we don't actually need those and we don't want to clutter up our workspace. Okay, on the top right, we have our quick action buttons, which is your homing, sleep, unlock, reset, followed by your axes, your G code, and your macros, and then lower down is your probe information. We'll get to all of that as we go through, but I just wanted to give you a brief rundown of what is actually in the system. Now, to connect your CNC, you want to use a USB-C to USB-A, not a USB-C to USB-C. For whatever reason, they do not work, so make sure you're using an A. If you're having problems, check that's what you're using. After you've plugged in your CNC, you want to go up here to your connections box on the top left corner, hit the refresh button, and then you want to find the port that is Silicon Labs. In my case, is COMS3, so we're going to select that. You're going to hit connect automatically, and then we're going to go ahead and open. As you can see in your console, now you have your command window, which is your black window there that says we are connected. Now we're going to go up to the top right, and we're going to hit the reset button, which is going to reset everything. And then at the bottom, you should see an OK. So your machine should have reset all of its standard parameters, and then it'll say OK. At this point, do not jog your machine. We haven't calibrated CNC.js to suit your machine. We'll do that in a second. At this point, we want to jump back over to the MakerStore website and then download here the master list of their macros for configuring the specific machines. Okay, so once we've got that downloaded, we are going to jump into the file, and then it is going to give us a list of every possible option that the MakerStore sell in terms of the CNC machines. We are using a Workbee version 3, so we're going to go into that one. Then it gives us the transmission types. In our particular case, we are using a rack and pinion system, so we are going to go into that file. Now you get your list of all of your file options with all of your size machines. It is listed with the X axis by the Y axis. So in my case, my X is 1,500, my Y is 3,000, and it's a high torque. So we're going to find that file. So we have that one there. We're going to open that, and that is going to give us a list of all of the commands that are required to flash our X Pro. So to copy that over, hit Control A, everything will be highlighted. Control C is copy. Then we're going to go back to CNC.js. On the right hand side, we have this macro widget down here. We are going to add a new macro. We're going to call it whatever you would like to call it. In our case, we're going to name it something logical like Workbee 3 1500 by 3000 high torque, and then we are going to paste our command. From there, we hit OK, and then in that macro field, we've added our Workbee macro. So to actually flash the X Pro, what we want to do is hit the play button on that macro, and then hit the blue run button. What you can see in your console list there is everything has been actioned by the OK. So from where we ran our macro, every step has been marked as OK down there. There's been no errors there. So now we know we have actually flashed our X Pro. So now our CNC is ready to use. But before we go ahead and do it, we want to do some fine tuning of our machine to make sure everything is running properly and efficiently. So the first thing we want to do is we want to check that our stepper motors are running in the direction that we want them to be running rather than what the actual macro does. So if we need to invert them or change anything, we can do that. So let's have a look at the machine. So I'm going to do a bit of jumping back and forth between machine, computer, and you guys. So there's going to be a lot of dancing around here. So first things first we want to do is home the machine. So to do that, we're just going to hit the blue home button in the top right corner, and that's actually going to go ahead and home our machine. It'll move up to your limit switch and then come back off that and go back up to confirm its height. then it's going to do the same on the X and Y. So there we go. We've now got our 0, 0 position of the machine. Now we want to check that by moving it in a positive direction, it's actually going to move to the right and then front and back and then down. So what we're going to do is jump over to the computer and we are going to jog our machine on that right hand side. So in our case, we're going to set this down to 1 millimeter. So you can change how far you're jogging it on the little drop down here. So we're going to go to 1 millimeter, and on the X, we want to make sure that the plus is taking it to the right. So X is correct, as you can see there. So now for your purposes on the camera, we're going to make it 20 mil. So you can see that we are moving to the right there. And now we're going to set it back to 1. We're going to check our Y. So Y is also correct. So if we set that to 100, we see we're moving in the back direction, which is what we want. So now we're going to check our X axis. So by moving down, we are actually moving down. So we do not need to do any inverting. So we're actually set up the way we want to operate, but you may want it to be that by moving down, you actually go up, or you've got it set as your 0, 0 in the far right corner, whatever it might be, you can work it to suit you. The other reason it may not be behaving the same way as mine is how it's been wired up. It's not a problem, it's just how it's been done. So you may need to invert them based off your wiring. It's easier to do it in the software rather than mucking around with your wiring. So we'll jump back on the computer and I'll just run you through it how you actually do it. So to change that, we're going to jump back on the computer and we're going to open up that macro. So the macro that we created down in this bottom right corner, if you hit this little pencil and notepad, it'll actually edit your macro. You can go down to stepper motor direct invert, which is the 5th line down. So as per the standard, it has X there. So say I wanted to invert my Y, I could add a Y there. Say I wanted to invert my Z, I could add a Z, or if I wanted to remove the X, I could delete that. So you've got that full control over your machine through that macro. So you can tweak and change things as you get more experience. And the Maker Store is always there to assist you if you need to call them and say, hey, I need to know what this does, or I've got this problem. So make sure you reach out if you are having trouble. I know I've done that a couple of times. We are going to call it there. This is Kieran from 6 months in the future. I was going through editing this video and realized, man, it's getting pretty long. So we are going to split off setting up the XYZ probe and calibrating the CNC into separate videos. So subscribe to the channel if you want to see then. And you may notice that there is a nice looking hold down table powered by vacuums. I don't know if you can see them under there. If you want to see that build, definitely subscribe to the channel. If you've gotten anything out of this video and you think it deserves a thumbs up, smash that thumbs up because it helps us spread to more people like you. A lot of people skip this step when they pick up their new CNC, which causes their machine to cut inaccurately. You start to cut oblongs instead of circles, rectangles instead of squares. So if you want to see how to sort that problem out, stick around. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk calibration of your CNC. Basically, that means ensuring that when you tell your CNC to move 1000 millimeters, it actually moves 1000 millimeters. Let's jump over the machine and explain this. Okay, so your machine is run by stepper motors, which are these black motors here, whether it be a lead screw or a rack and pinion, both have stepper motors. What you need to work out is how many steps does that machine need to move to get 1 millimeter. So to do that, we'll use a website as well as jump into CNC.js to go through how we actually work out the correct value. And we'll show you some tips along the way. Let's jump on the computer. We're going to be using our Workbench 3 CNC from the Maker Store to do this, but the process is going to be very similar for whatever CNC you're using, whether you're using a full-size CNC or a desktop CNC, very similar. The principles are the same. Let's jump into CNC.js and work out what we need to know to calibrate our machine. So if you jump on your computer, you'll have a macro down here that is actually what sets up your machine. You want to open that up, and if you scroll down, you will have a steps per millimeter for your X, Y, and Z axis. So I've currently got mine set up and my machine is calibrated. So I've got custom values in there, but for the sake of this, I'm going to revert back to random numbers so you can see exactly what that does to the machine. As best practice, anytime I play with my settings on my machine, I copy and save a copy of the code in case I need to ever revert back to the original after I've made my changes. So I'll go ahead and hit Control A, Control C, which is copy, open up a notepad, paste that, and then I am just going to save that to my desktop. All right, there we go. I already have one saved from previous, so current CNC settings, save. Now I've got that there if I ever need to come back to it. So I'm now going to go ahead and I'm just going to make this 33, 33, and 201. And then that one would be the same as my Y. So I'm going to save my changes. So I'm going to run my macro. Then I'm going to reset my controller. If you don't know how to reset your controller, on the side of the controller near the switch is an actual reset button. So you hit that. Anytime you update your macro, you're going to have to reset that. Now we're going to jump over to the CNC. Okay, so we're going to work through each axis, marking and measuring to hone in the distance. So rather than talk about it, we're just going to jump in and do it. You're going to need yourself a really sharp pencil and a straight edge. And all you're going to do is mark in line where your plate is currently. Once you've marked your plate, jump back onto your computer. We're going to set ourselves a custom distance because I want to move 1 meter. So I'm going to go make my jog distance 1,000. And that is what we're going to use for our X. So now we're going to move our X across 1,000 millimeters. From there, we're going to grab a tape measure. We're going to butt our tape measure into that plate, measuring to our mark. I'm going to bring you in close so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. For the purposes of your viewing, I'm going to put some tape there so you can actually see the mark. So if I pull my tape across here, so my measurement is 1,034 millimeters. So you can imagine if I was cutting out a sign or a bit of furniture or a template, and I told my machine to move 1,000 millimeters and it actually moved 34 millimeters more, that's a big issue. So to calibrate that, we're going to jump on a website and we're going to plug in some data, which is going to give us a new steps per millimeter to hone this bad boy in. Let's jump on the computer. So first thing you're going to want to do is home your machine, which is going to bring it back to your 0, spot. Now, open up that macro again, find your X-axis value, which we had as 33. We're going to jump over to a website called layerfused.com. Link will be in the description below, but jump over to tools and there is a calibration tool. So what you're going to need to do is plug in your current steps per millimeter, which we were 33. Target value currently set as 100. Massive tip here. You want to use your maximum distance possible to get as accurate results as possible. If you hone in on 100 millimeters, but you're 0.1 millimeter out, by the time you're at the end of your CNC, you are 1.2 millimeters out. So if you hone it in your 0.1 millimeter out on over the whole machine, then you're only going to be 0.1 millimeter out, if that makes sense. Compounding error is a killer. So do it over the most distance you can to get as accurate results as possible. If you think that's a good tip, smash that thumbs up, but let's get stuck into calibrating. So our target value was 1,000. Our measured value was 1,034, which gives us a new steps per millimeter. So we're going to copy that, go back into our macro, update our macro, hit save, run. So now our macro's ran. We're going to reset our machine. Perfect. Now we are going to jog it over the 1,000 millimeters again. So we're doing the exact same process. Let's measure. And now we are bang on a meter. I don't know if you can see that. And that is how quick and easy it is to calibrate your X and Y axes. But you can see the amount of error that could have happened had you skipped this step. Calibrating your X-axis is exactly the same principle as such. However, I do it a little bit differently on the machine with a set of calipers and a clamp. So we'll show you how we do that. First things first, get rid of any dust, boot, hoses, take your bit out. You just want nothing in the way to knock your calipers. Okay, so you want to grab your calipers, place them in position, touching surfaces not going to move, clamp that in position, and then zero that out. Okay, so now we are perfectly on 0, except you cannot see my calipers. So I'm going to lift this bad boy up. We are going to follow the exact same process as before, except this time we're going to move down 50 millimeters instead of moving across 1,000 millimeters. So we're going to jump over, set ourselves a custom distance, make that 50, hit save changes, change the distance to 50. Now we're going to make our X-axis go down 50 millimeters. Ready and go. That will have pushed the calipers down, giving us an exact distance moved. So we are 50.14. 1.3. So we're going with 1.3. Okay, so now we're gonna jump into the computer, update our steps, and then rerun that test to see what result we get. So exact same process, pick your macro, work out your X steps. So we're 201. Now we are gonna go into layer fused. So our current steps are 201. Our target value was 50 millimeters. Our measured was 50.13. This is our new step value. So we'll paste that, we'll save those changes. We're gonna run our macro, run. When that finishes running, we are then going to reset our macro. We're gonna unlock. We are going to home our machine, reset our calipers, and then rerun the test. Now we are going to send it down 50 millimeters. So now I am 0.8 millimeters out. So after doing everything there, we were 0.08 millimeters out, which is less than the thickness of a sheet of paper. So for what I do, I'm happy with that. But you could run that again and then keep updating your steps until you hone that in precisely. The reality is, to that kind of precision, I'm relying on a set of calipers that I don't know are that accurate. So for me, I am happy with those results. And that, my friends, is how simple it is to calibrate your machine, which is vital, particularly if you built your machine yourself. Because out of the box, there's always gonna be variant, always gonna be slightly different tension between people on your pinion, or your racking, sorry. There's going to be slightly different tightness of your bolts and your screws. So always calibrate your machine after you've assembled it. If you like content like this and wanna see more tips and tricks in relation to our CNC, subscribe to the channel. If you've got anything out of this video, we would appreciate you smashing that thumbs up button, because that helps us know that you're enjoying the content, so we'll start making more in this format and about these topics. Ever wondered what an XYZ probe or standard probe for a CNC is used for and how to use it? Let's go through that now. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to chat about what the use of a XYZ probe or a regular probe is for a CNC and how to set it up and use it correctly. The purpose of a probe for a CNC is to set your zero position for your machine in reference to your workpiece. A standard probe would only set your X height. The software and the machine know the distance from the top of your probe to your workpiece. So by sliding this in, setting it up correctly, in my case, my probe is 5 millimeters thick. So when setting my X, it would go, hey, I've touched the top of that. So I now know the workpiece is 5 millimeters away from this position. Let's set our zero position based on that. The difference between an XYZ probe and a regular probe is the XYZ probe has these positive references, which can actually sit against a corner on your material. This allows you to get your X, Y, and Z axis zeroed out in reference to a corner of a piece of material. Let's go through how we set that up using our WorkB3 CNC from the Maker Store and CNC.js as our interface software. Let's jump on a computer. So first thing we need to do is set up another macro. If you've been following along, we have set up macros in the past to configure CNC.js in relation to our particular machine. Now we're gonna set one up to configure the XYZ probe. To do that, we're going to jump over to the Maker Store website. We are going to click on resources up the top here, select assembly manuals, and then on the left-hand side, we have an XYZ touch probe reference. Now, if you haven't set up your XYZ probe in terms of wiring everything in, we do go through that in our build series. Otherwise, you can refer to this entire manual, which will walk you through step by step. We are just going to skip down straight to firstly download your XYZ macro. So we're going to click here and it is going to bring up a macro. All you're going to do is copy this entire macro. So we're going to select it all, Control C, which is copy, go back into our interface software, which is CNC.js. Down the left-hand side, we are going to add a macro. The macro command is everything that we just copied across. We are going to name that XYZ probe. And all we're going to do is hit OK, and we are going to save that macro. So now you can see we've added that macro. While we're in the midst of configuring our touch probe, I also like to jump down here to the probe section. So the probe section in CNC.js is designed for a Z probe, not an XYZ probe. So that's why we have to set that macro up. The probe section I do use, and I do use that quite regularly. That is for when I'm just setting my Z axis, so my height, not my X and my Y. But I do like to make sure that that touch plate thickness is correct. I sort of go with a probe depth of 50 millimeters, a probe feed rate, I would say 50 is acceptable. Touch plate thickness of 5 and retraction distance of 4 millimeters. Basically means we are going to go down 50 mil to touch the top of the plate at 50 millimeters per minute. Once we hit the plate, we know that's 5 millimeters off our top surface. And then we're going to lift back up 4 millimeters so we can get our plate out. That's what that all means. But now that we've got that set up, let's jump over the workpiece and show you how to actually use it. Okay, so on my plate, I have a little X, which is just above the circle here. That is the ideal location to position your bit above just to get it roughly right. You want to be about 5 to 10 millimeters off the top of the plate, but all you're going to do is sit the plate in position, take your alligator clamp and clamp that onto your bit. Then you want to jump over to your computer and position that roughly in the right spot. I like to use my keyboard, so I will give keypad jogging a tick. I will set my distance to 1 millimeter. And now I can use my arrow keys to position that roughly where it needs to be. And then my page down to lower the the Z axis. I'll run back over, check we're roughly in the right spot. Whoops. We'll go up a couple. So now I'm relatively above the X. I'm just going to lower it down a little bit. Then we are going to go down to that probe, hit the play button on the XYZ probe, hit run. So now you can see that it's moving down with strangely shaped bits. I do like to grab the collet and spin it so the cutter is hitting square on. We'll do the same with this direction. Move it so the cutter is hitting square on. Okay, so now that we've run the probe, you'll be able to see that we are dead center of the corner reference that we were referencing off. You can see there, we are dead center. We're about 13 millimeters higher. And if you go around this way, again, dead center. So we now know that our 000 point is the top reference edge of that corner. Let's go ahead and run this G code for this serving tray. Then we'll show you how to use the probe function of CNC.js, which just repositions the height of the Z axis without altering the X and Y. Okay, so we have ran our first G code for this project. Now we want to reset. So I've changed the bit over to our cutting bit, and we want to keep the X and Y axes the same as what was originally referenced, but now we have a new height because we've got a different size bit. What we're going to do is use the probe upside down and use the probe function within CNC.js rather than the macro. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so we've got our bit there. So we're going to take our probe, instead of lipping this over the edge, which we can, so we can lip this over the edge, or we can put this down on flat, hook on our alligator clip, hook it on so it stays. Now we'll jump over to the computer. So what we're going to do on the computer is scroll down in CNC.js. This is the macro we ran before. We're going to skip over that. We are actually going to run the probe function that we set up earlier. So we are going to hit probe, run probe, and that is going to lower our bit down onto our metal plate. And when it makes connection, it'll register that we've hit the plate, back itself off 4 millimeters, and that will reset our Z's 0 position, leaving our X and Y exactly the same. Perfect. Now we can get rid of our probe, hook up our dust collection, and run the cut. Now that was a great way to kill two birds with one stone. I got to make a birthday gift for my wife, as well as show you how I use my X, Y, and Z probe for the CNC. If you've got anything out of this video, I'd love you to smash that thumbs up button because it helps us know that this content suits you so we can make more of it for you. Do you want to understand the basic principles of CNC machining? Let's jump into CAM, CAD, CNC machining and explain what these are all about. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about the basic fundamentals of CNC machining. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced maker, understanding CAD, CAM, and CNC machining fundamentals is essential to unlock the full potential of your CNC machine. Let's dive right in. The first fundamental of CNC machining is CAD, computer-aided design. CAD software allows you to create a precise and detailed digital design of your project. With CAD, you can bring your ideas to life and visualize them before executing them on your CNC machine. Familiarizing yourself with popular CAD softwares like AutoCAD, SketchUp, or Fusion 360 is essential. You will need to learn how to create 2D and 3D models, import and export files, and design components that are compatible with your CNC machine. My personal go-to is Fusion 360. However, I'm not the person to teach that. So I'll leave that to the experts. I'll link some courses in the description if you want to check those out. Another thing I highly recommend is you smash that like button so you let me know you're liking this video. By mastering CAD, you'll have the power to create intricate designs, optimize material usage, and ensure precision on your CNC project. Now that you've got your design ready, it's time to move on to the second fundamental, CAM, which stands for Computer-Aided Manufacturing. CAM software translate your CAD design into instructions, or G-code as it's called, for your CNC to operate. CAM programs generate the toolpaths that specify the cutting, drilling, and carving operation of your CNC. The software allows you to construct a toolpath based on your designated cutter, cut depth, feed rate, and other parameters. The reason I like Fusion 360 is it's both a CAD and a CAM software. Where SketchUp and AutoCAD only create the designs, then you have to use something like Vectrix Aspire to create the CAM side of things. Other benefit is Fusion's 3, Vectrix not. But you can still use standalone CAD software, import them into CAM software to generate your desired toolpath, exporting your required G-code for the machine. With the CAM software, you have the ability to optimize the toolpath, maximize efficiency, and ensure precise results for your project. The third fundamental of the CNC machining process is machine operation and setup. Understanding how to operate your CNC machine safely and efficiently is crucial for success. Familiarize yourself with the various components of your CNC machine, such as your spindle, motors, controller, and safety features. Take the time to understand how these components work together to deliver optimal performance. Learn how to set up your workpiece, secure it to your machine's bed, and properly align your CNC's coordination points to ensure accurate cuts and prevent any mishaps during operation. Master the process of loading and unloading your tools, setting tool offsets, and calibrating your machine for precise cuts. If you don't know how to calibrate your machine, subscribe to the channel as I've got a video coming out explaining that entire process to get the most out of your machine. Regular maintenance, including cleaning, lubricating, and tool inspection, is essential to keeping your CNC machine in top shape. By mastering the operation and setup of your CNC machine, you will be able to work with confidence, efficiency, and do it all safely. Hopefully now you can understand the fundamentals of CAD, CAM, and CNC machine setup. I hope this allows you to do more research and explore the world of CNC machining. Consider subscribing to the channel as we are going to start to produce more and more videos about CNC machining in the near future. If you found this video helpful, love you to smash that thumbs up button because it knows you enjoyed this content and we'll create more like this. Do you want to know 5 of the most common mistakes beginners make when using their CNCs for the first time and how to avoid them? Stick around, this video is for you. G'day guys, Kieran here from KJH Woodworking and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to discuss how to avoid 5 of the most common mistakes made when starting out with a new CNC. Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional woodworker, understanding these mistakes and knowing how to avoid them will greatly improve your CNC experience in the workshop. Let's dive straight in. The first mistakes many many beginners make is failing to understand the basic fundamentals of a CNC machine itself. Lots of people on YouTube make it out that you get your CNC and then bang, you jump straight in and poof, you're building stuff immediately. It is not that simple. There is a steep learning curve if you have never played in the CNC space before, don't understand CAD, don't understand CAM, don't understand what G-code is. All of that is a steep learning curve. Not impossible, but I just want you to be aware that it's not buy it and you get stuck straight in. Like any skill, you have to go through the learning process. Once you get there, it's brilliant, but you got to go through it. It is crucial to learn about tool paths, feeds and speeds, machine setup, safety precautions before you dive into using your machine. By familiarizing yourself with these fundamentals, you will be better prepared to operate your machine efficiently and produce accurate cuts to get a really good end result. Take your time to do multiple test cuts on a variety of different material, testing and recording the speeds and feeds you're using, because one thing to consider is your machine is going to be different to another machine. So you need to know what speeds and feeds work for your machine. Keep in mind that the majority of information on the internet is based around industrial CNCs like an Avid CNC. But for most hobbyists, we're gonna have desktop CNCs which don't have the same power or capabilities. So you wanna make sure you're testing your machine to get the results you need. The other thing you wanna make sure is you take the time to learn the software. You will get much more out of mastering the software than you will out of mastering the machine itself. If you spend the time getting the toolpath right and using simulations, it's a lot less stressful when you're watching a computer simulate what's gonna happen rather than watching your machine actually do it on an expensive piece of timber and throwing that down the drain. Use the software to your advantage and learn the software. I cannot stress that enough. Take it from me, I nearly blew up my spindle in my first operation, which was completely my fault and could have been completely avoided had I have tested my feeds and speeds better and had I have ran a simulation on the computer. Remember, smash that like button if you're getting anything out of this video. Remember, every machine is different. Don't trust what you find on the internet without testing it yourself. Another common mistake is inadequate material preparation. Failure to properly prepare your wood for CNC work can result in poor quality cuts and potentially damage your machine. Ensure your wood is flat and secured to your CNC spoil board. Take your time preparing the workpiece and securing it to get optimal results. If you're interested in seeing how we built our CNC hold down system, which includes bolt holes and a vacuum table, subscribe to the channel as that video is in the making now and will be on our channel in the near future. Incorrect tool selection is a massive issue for newcomers to the CNC world. There are so many different types of cutters. Do you need an upcut? Do you need a downcut, a compression, a engraving bit? What bit do you need to achieve the results that you require? Knowing what tool to use when is vital. Different types of timber and different types of cuts require different types of tools. Different bits have a variety of flute configurations, lengths, cutting geometry. Remember the classic saying, use the right tool for the right job? That cannot be more true than when you're talking CNC cutting. Using the wrong tool can lead to a poor cut, chipping to your workpiece, and even breaking the tools. And those tools are not cheap. Take the time to research and select the right tool for what you are trying to achieve with your workpiece. The right tool will get you the right results. The wrong tool will get you the wrong results. Keep that in mind. Another common issue that can affect the quality of your cuts is not setting the appropriate cutting parameters. Factors such as feed rate, spindle speed, and depth of cut play a crucial role in achieving the best possible results. Cutting too fast or too slow, using the incorrect spindle speed, or having excessive depths of cuts can lead to burning, tear out, and ineffective cutting. Not to mention increasing the heat of your tool, causing it to dull quicker. Always refer to your machine's manufacturer specifications to ensure you're getting optimal results. Again, The biggest issue I find in this space is the fact that the information out on the internet is designed around CNCs like your Avid CNC, not for your hobbyist CNC like the WorkBee version 3 like I've got. Make sure you test for your machine. I cannot stress that enough. And again, another issue that I see regularly is people neglecting to do test cuts. And when I say test cuts, I mean that both simulated test cuts and what's a non-simulated test cut? Actual test cuts. It is essential to make sure your tool paths are programmed correctly and that your machine is going to move as expected. Running test cuts and simulated test cuts help you identify errors and issues with your G-code before running it on expensive timber. Always remember, running a simulation is a lot cheaper than running it on a workpiece. Timber is expensive, right? If you found these tips helpful, smash that like button, it's greatly appreciated. By being aware of these common mistakes and taking necessary precautions to avoid them will greatly enhance your CNC experience as a maker. Remember to prioritize safety and gaining experience by practicing and learning from your errors along the way. Avoiding these mistakes will save you time, money, and effort, allowing you to achieve better results and unlocking the full potential of your CNC machine. If you've liked this video, I think you're gonna love the build series we have on our CNC machine. And as always, thank you for watching. Happy building. Cheers, guys.